Okay, so now that we've got our reflections and our reflection blurriness in place, I'd like us to deal with our reflection surface color pass. And this is a pass that's going to parallel the diffuse surface color pass for our diffuse component. If you recall, with the diffuse surface color pass, we had a pass that could either be a constant color or a texture map that allowed us to specify what color of diffuse light our surface would reflect. We're going to generate an exact identical pass now, but that's going to be specifying what color of reflected light does our surface reflect. And this is really useful for dealing with generating a shader that can represent a wide variety of materials, because something like plastic has white reflections. The reflection color is not determined by the diffuse color of the plastic. However, something like metal, let's say we had a sort of copper coloured metal, well, not only is the diffuse colour of that metal copper in colour, sort of a browny colour, but also the reflections are tinted that colour as well. And that's a very strong property of metal, is that the reflections are coloured as well as the diffuse, whereas plastics, their reflections are white, whereas the diffuse is coloured. And so by being able to specify a colour multiplier of our reflections, it allows us to use our shader for determining both plastic type surfaces and metal type surfaces. And by giving the artist the ability to use either a constant colour or a texture map, they really have a variety of ways they can work, and a lot of customization of the shader for a particular object that they have sort of available to them. And because we've already implemented a pass that's very similar for our diffuse color, it's going to be very easy for us to switch and take those nodes and basically reutilize them for our reflection surface color. So I'm going to jump over into our shader. And the first thing I'd like to do, we're dealing with our diffuse surface color here. And you'll notice I didn't rename our switch earlier, so I want to rename this to switch diffuse. Let's call this switch diffuse color map. There we go. And I want to copy the texture that we could use as a diffuse surface color along with the actual parameter that's specifying that texture. The color, if we didn't use a texture. The switch that switches between them. And the toggle for controlling that switch. I'm going to copy these, paste them. I'm going to bring these down underneath our existing network. Now I want to rename these for our reflection surface color. I'm actually going to just abbreviate that in this case to reflection color. So that means that this is going to be our reflection color map toggle, our reflection color, our reflection color texture, our reflection color map, and switch reflection color map. Now we do need to be careful. We've got some parameters here. That means the parameter names and possibly their labels need to be updated. So on our reflection color map toggle, let's set the parameter name to reflection color map toggle. I'm going to leave the label with use texture. Our reflection color, I want to have the parameter name reflection color and the parameter label reflection color. Our reflection color map, I want to have the parameter name reflection color map and the parameter label reflection color map. We can now take the output of our switch, which is going to be our new reflection surface color pass, and I'm going to wire that into the latest input of our switch render pass. And that now leaves us with the ability to, let me undo moving that node, with the ability to promote up these parameters along with setting up that new render pass, and that's everything we need to do for controlling our reflection surface color. So let me bring up the type properties of our material, and I want to go ahead and let's start by promoting up those new parameters. So I'm going to hunt down our reflection color map, reflection color, and the use texture. Let's make sure we're not prefixing those parameters, and I'm going to promote them into our reflections folder. Now I do want these to be in the order of color first, then the toggle second, then the map third, and then a separator before our reflection blurriness. And I want to set up the reflection color to be disabled when the use texture toggle is on, the color map to be disabled when that toggle is off, just as before when we set up our diffuse surface color. So I'm going to grab the parameter name for our toggle, and reflection color is going to be disabled when that's equal to a value of 1, and the map is going to be disabled when that's equal to a value of 0. Let's also add in that new entry into the render pass parameter. So I'm going to jump over to the menu tab, and this is going to be pass 5, and this pass is going to be our reflection surface color. If we now accept this and take a look at the parameters for our material, we can see here's our reflections, there's reflection blurriness before, and now we have reflection color, which is white by default, or we can use a texture and we can switch back and forth. I'm going to leave this set to white. Just bear that in mind when we do first render out this new pass, we are going to have a pure white render pass. We can also see we do have that reflection surface color available from this drop down. So let's make sure that it's also available from our drop down on the render settings node, which is in the output context. So I'm going to bring up the parameter, edit parameter interface for that node, and let's make sure that we add a reflection surface color entry for number 5 for that parameter so that it matches what we have on our asset. I also want to create a new take, so I'm going to jump over to takes, create a new child take of passes. This is our reflection surface color, and with this take active, I want to include our render pass parameter from our render settings in that take, and I want to set it to the reflection surface color. We can then switch back over to the main take, and on mantra 1 I'm going to render out using the reflection surface color take. So let's render. I'll bring up the task manager, let's hunt down mantra. There we go, just so we know when that render has finished. Fantastic. And that should mean we jump over to the composite view, into our compositing network, and I should be able to bring in that new pass. So let's hunt down our reflection surface color pass, and we should be expecting this to be pure white. So there's our pure white pass. Now we said with the diffuse surface color, it's as simple as multiplying the diffuse component with the diffuse surface color. Exact same thing applies here with reflections. So I'm going to multiply our reflections by the reflection surface color, which at the moment is having no impact because we're multiplying a color by white. That means we get the exact same color back. However, if we were to now jump back over to our shader, and on our material we were to use a texture instead, and I'm actually going to use the black and white checkerboard. I guess actually we could just use the normal checkerboard and see an orange and blue reflection color. Would be quite interesting. So let's leave it set to the checkerboard.targa texture. We then head back over to our output, re-render the reflection surface color pass. Again, there's mantra. Let's just wait for mantra to finish rendering. So it shouldn't take too long. It's a very quick pass, just as the diffuse surface color was. And we can now switch over to our composite view, back over to our compositing network. So there was our pass before. We reload it. We've now got a pass that looks very familiar to us because it should look exactly the same as our diffuse surface color, only this is for reflections and can be set differently on our material. And if we multiply those together, now there are our reflections being modified by that reflection color. And you can see that here, especially where we have orange reflection colors, that's giving us quite a metallic look. And where we're getting specular highlights that are tinted a color, it feels a lot more metallic than they would otherwise, especially when we start combining them with a diffuse component and having a diffuse component with certain colors. You can get very metallic looks by having the reflection surface color and diffuse surface color in similar sort of color ranges, or you can get a very plastic look by having the reflection surface color white while having a colored diffuse surface color. So it's a very simple pass to implement. We now have that additional pass and we're almost done with our reflections, but in the next video we need to implement reflection occlusion. So that's going to conclude the reflection surface color pass. Thanks a lot, everyone.